Good day, Chairmen. How are you guys doing?
Very well.
Doing good.
How's the view from the Miata today, Brian? Where are you sitting today?
Sitting in the back. A little bit sunny. So I got some sun on my face. It's 109 for me.
Oh boy,
degrees.
Ooh.
Yeah, a little hot, a little toasty.
Are we talking Celsius or Fahrenheit? Because I can go both.
Definitely Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Celsius might be.
It's about 41
deadly.
degrees Celsius.
That's a hot day.
Yes,
are you guys? If you're sitting in the middle, if you're the only one in the back seat, sorry, are you guys middle sitters or do you go for one of the windows? As an adult, back of the car, you're the only one there. Where do you sit?
I'm going for the window so I can lay my head on the.
Okay. So it's been a choppy night. You didn't get enough sleep. Maybe the kids are keeping you up. You got to take a rest. Okay. Well, I hope you're not going to sleep through this episode, Brian, because we need you. And I also want to say, if you guys are listeners, if you guys are in the backseat here with Brian and you're liking your trip in the Miata, I want to bring this up early in the episode. We are doing our absolute best here to bring you guys some interesting content, and hopefully today is no different. If you guys can help us get this content out to more people, the easiest way to do that, and if we can ask one favor, is to leave a review in Apple Podcasts. That is the place to help us get this podcast out to more people. I just figured while we're talking about the Miata and taking a little trip closer to Tone Town today, we haven't arrived, but we're getting a little bit closer episode by episode. Leaving that review would really help us out, and thank you in advance. I'm not even asking for a 5-star review, by the way. An honest review would be hugely appreciated. So thank you guys so much. And I want to get into the episode today. This is one I have been thinking about, not nonstop, but quite a bit. For the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've been thinking about this episode and what it could look like. Today, as the title of the podcast will probably give away, I wanted to chat about dual overdrives. And obviously, I want to cover some of our favorites, maybe even some of our least favorites if we even get there. But I really wanted to spend some time on talking about, are dual overdrives really all that helpful? Are they just as good, if not better, than 2 individual overdrives? What do you look for when you're getting a dual overdrive if you decide to go that route? Or if I'm going to give this away a little bit, if you're kind of like myself, you may avoid them and you may not go down that road. And I want to chat about that a bit today. So firstly, for you, Mason, and then to you, Brian, when someone says, what are your thoughts on dual overdrives, or they just talk about dual overdrives in general, is that a trigger for you? Do you kind of go into shock a bit and want to avoid the question? Or what are your thoughts on dual overdrives, big picture?
Big picture dual overdrives. Well, I would say historically, I think that they are challenging for most pedal brands. And I say that in that most companies that are doing dual overdrives are typically taking 2 of their effects that maybe are already available and they're combining them under one roof. And sometimes the challenge is, how do we take buyers that already own half of the product and convince them to rebuy half of it so that they can add on another pedal to the mix? So the word on the street from a manufacturer standpoint is that typically dual pedals do not sell as well. However, there have been some pedal companies in recent memory, thinking of the Duelist, for example, from Jesse Davey, King Tone, the Protein from Brown Amplification. I'm sure that there's others that we're going to get into, King of Tone, that have disproved that. Even in our own brand, and I'm not equating, or equivalency of this product, although we've sold, I think, over 10,000 of them, our dual steel string pedal, that sold a ton, and so there are exceptions to the rule, but I think that generally a lot of companies end up with dual overdrives. They struggle to get those out there because it's hard to convince somebody, if they want maybe one sound of it, that they also need the other sound. but recent memory stuff has been good. But I'm anxious to talk about some of the OG ones because I remember them from some of these dual overdrives from the old days. They were super cool. They don't get a lot of love anymore. And I will refrain though from talking about those now, but I do want to talk about them. There's some really great ones out there.
Nice. Love it. Love the tease, Mason. You're just getting us to hang on for more. I love it.
Yes,
Brian,
yes.
What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, when someone mentions a dual overdrive, typically I'll have some initial questions, which unit it is, which model it is, because like even the protein, as Mason mentioned, the first version didn't have like split loop, so you could split the sides to do TRS split, where the newest version does. So there's a lot of those questions that, yes, it can also hinder, and that's the cool thing, Brown. They did, right? They came out with their protein, but then they also split the protein in half and did their the carbon and I think it's called the atom, those two, and those I think are essentially just a protein. So, and they said it like, yeah, if you don't want both, you can go buy just the side you want, which is a cool approach. So I think dual overdrives, to sum it up before we continue, are great, especially they're great space savers, one power cable, splitting the size. I think it can get tricky on your setup though, especially if like you buy a $900 King of Tone and it has two switches but only a single in and out. Like that kind of stuff can get kind of not tedious, but can get complicated, especially with routing and stuff. But yeah, no, I think they're still great pedals. It just kind of depends on the player.
And there are some pros. Like, tell me guys if I'm missing anything here. There some of the pros, because I don't want to just be a negative guy bringing the whole vibe down. It's just, it's not my style. But basically, some of the pros, instead of, let's say you have the choice of a dual overdrive versus two single overdrives to take the same spot on your board. A dual overdrive, you're going to have one power cable instead of two, even though, playing devil's advocate, you might be able to daisy chain them if they're both analog overdrives. Less patch cabling. But then also the pros and cons, you might need more complex cabling if you're going to split them, like the newer Brown protein and a lot of overdrives allow. You might need insert cables instead of just, a couple of patch cables. Space saving, potentially, if you're going for something like an Archer, which is a little bit smaller than, an RC Booster 1590B and has top-mounted jacks, you actually could probably fit two of that size pedal in the space of a dual overdrive or a typical dual overdrive. Any other pros to duals? Only other one I could think of is they often have the flip-flop switch, so you can run section A or side A into side B and side B into side A really easily without having to repatch. Any other pros I'm missing?
Did you say space saving?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, okay, space saver.
Yep. Yeah, so there are some definite pros. There are also some cons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to start being the negative guy. So why don't one of you guys start with cons? Cons to dual overdrives, in your guys' opinion. If there are any, there might not be.
I think the big con for me would be as if you're running a switching system and you want to individually control each side. That right there, that will tell me pretty quickly, and you guys kind of like, the musician will be like, oh yeah, I really want the left side in loop A and the second side in loop B, but then they see that there's only a single in and out because they bought it that way or they didn't want to do the upgrades. So I would say that is a con to some of those because some of them just don't have it. And I know now, I've never gotten in line for a King of Tone, so I don't know the process or anything, but like I know that they you can customize the sides or like how it's split or anything, but there are just some pedals on the market you can't do that with. Even like some like the Jackson Audio stuff, those are 2-in-1 pedals, but you can't split the sides. So stuff like that where you'd have to get really creative in your setup to where it even comes down to like layouts. That's a big thing. Like where it's at on your board so you can step on that other side. So yeah, that's definitely a con, is when it doesn't have the option to split the sides.
Which is something I don't think people would often think about as well, is layout wise. I was just doing a layout yesterday for someone with a couple of dual overdrives on their board, and they didn't have the split options on them. So I couldn't control it with the switcher. So I had to move them towards the front so that they could access those secondary foot switches. And it decided the layout for me and didn't give me the flexibility I needed because of that. And so that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. Well, this is just to as Grant is usually playing the devil's advocate.
Thank you.
Some of them, the hipper designs that are dual overdrives that don't have that split option, like I'm thinking of John Suhr pedals, for example, that maybe have 2 foot switches. He will often add an 1/8 inch jack that activates a relay that could then switch the channels.
Yep.
And so you could put that into one of the function changes in the switcher, and then use that to actually do the channel switch. So, and here's the thing, though. Also, again, to play devil's advocate, if you have a 2-channel overdrive and you have a split channel, I don't know how much it actually saves you, because you still have to use 2 loops in order to change the channels. So there's not much of a benefit, in my opinion, to having 2 separate pedals, presuming that they're somewhat compact. You know, for example, again, to use our brand, if we have an Ultraphonics and a Steel String Mark II side by side, they're roughly the same size as a Steel String Supreme, maybe a little bit wider, but you still are occupying 2 loops, whether it's 2 pedals combined in one and they have split loops, or it's 2 separate pedals. So it's not like there's a loop savings. I almost think it's a better option, instead of the independent loops, is to have something like Suhr had, where you have an ability to change the functions of the 2 different loops, or the 2 different functions, or the 2 different overdrives in the pedal, but it's not occupying 2 different loops, because you save a loop and you're just using the function switch to do the changes, which is just activating a relay like the foot switch would do when you activate or deactivate it. So I almost think that that's more beneficial on a dual loop if you're using a switcher than to have it split.
And I think for me, the last con, and I promise I'll try not to be so negative from this point on, guys. I'll uplift the vibe. I think my biggest thing is, when it comes to gain, there is a very, I would say it's very rare that I will find 2 gain pedals from one company that I want on my board at the same time. I like having different takes on different pedals. Like, I love Ibanez's TS9.
Ibanez.
I'm sorry.
Ibanez.
Man, I always forget. It's muscle memory, you know? I'm sorry, guys. Ibanez, the TS9. I love it. I love their take on it. Obviously, that's the classic. But then I wouldn't be putting another Ibanez Overdrive. People are going to think we're serious, by the way. Ibanez Overdrive on my board. I'm going to go for a KTR or a Bondi Sick-As or something else. I want different flavors, different takes. Typically, and not always, typically, a company will have a recognizable approach to a pedal. And you kind of like, oh yeah, I hear Strymon in that, or I hear Vertex in that, and that, like, that's almost impossible to avoid, but I like having that variety, and it's obviously very hard to get that when you're doing a dual overdrive by one company. So that's kind of my biggest thing, and there are certain dual overdrives that we talked about before that you're supposed to like, and I just can't get on board with. I don't enjoy them, or they don't click with me. The big one being a King of Tone. The Duelist, I absolutely love. I thought that one was great. But all that to say, I like having this single pedal variety from different manufacturers is what I've found. Not to say I've never liked a dual overdrive, because I absolutely have, but typically I like to have that flexibility, I'd say. Before we keep going, I want to chat about, Mason, I want to throw to you after this ad break for kind of the OGs, as you mentioned it, but I want to tell you guys about a couple of our sponsors first. The first one is the Guitar Sanctuary. Brian is there right now. I just picture you, Brian, waiting at the front doors of the Sanctuary for opening time. Like you're just that guy. You stopped off at Starbucks with your triple filtered water. You're waiting, anticipating, maybe checking out the bargain bin and going to the wall of PRS guitars and pedals and all that in the Sanctuary. But the Guitar Sanctuary has the gear that we're chatting about, and they have great customer service. And of course, they have Brian Omilion anticipating your arrival so that he can put this gear on a setup for you. I don't want to say you're too eager, but excited is kind of what I picture Brian, waiting for people to show up with the gear so you can set it up for them at the Guitar Sanctuary. So check out theguitarsanctuary.com, find the gear you need, get Brian to set it up for you on a beautiful rig, and take your playing to just that next level. It's going to be a good thing. The other sponsor I want to tell you guys about is Mono Creators. Obviously, they do incredible gig bags. I was just chatting to a customer this past week, actually. They were wanting a lightweight angled pedal board with room underneath. They had a whole bunch of stuff they needed to mount underneath. I was like, Mono, that's the one you need. And if you need the soft bag to go with it, obviously Mono does that as well. They have a whole range of products, from backpacks to gig bags to the pedal boards and accessories that go along with it. So use the code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, and you'll get 10%, 90% away from free. You will get 10% off your order using the code Chairmen at monocreators.com. So those are two of our sponsors. And I want to throw to you, Mason. I was trying to find out more information on this. Who was the first person to come up with a dual overdrive? I don't know if you know this or not, but I know you've got some thoughts, and you can tell us about it.
Yeah, I was really thinking hard about when we first started seeing kind of 2-in-1 pedals or things like that. You know, and I'm sure that I'm sure that I'm missing it. Ones that I had considered, and I'll screen share here for anybody that's watching on YouTube. They will be able to see what I'm seeing. And if you're listening on one of the podcast apps, I'll do my best to describe what you're seeing on the screen. So the first of which is an original full tone full drive.
Awesome.
And the original one only had 3 knobs. It just had volume, tone, overdrive. Again, this is a replica or Mike Fuller's take on a Tube Screamer. In this era, had just a fixed boost amount. On some of the later versions where he transitioned to his own enclosure, the boost had a pot connected to it, so you could adjust how much boost was needed in order to facilitate the perfect combination of overdrive and boost. This is a pretty early one. I would suspect the one that we're seeing on the screen is probably early 90s. Another one that I think was early on was these Pedalworks. Not too early on, not as early on as that. They had some dual overdrives also in the Tube Screamer camp called the Texas Two-Step. That was a pretty early one I can think of. I think this is also even earlier, the Double Trouble by what's now True Tone, but was formerly Visual Sound. They also had another pedal called Jekyll and Hyde. And they kind of did these pedals that were in the shape of like a home plate on a baseball diamond. Kind of unusual enclosure sizes, but really, really good sounding pedals. I think even the earlier versions had more standard kind of mechanical foot switches instead of what you see here, which looks like maybe it's activating some sort of relay. There were some really interesting pedals coming out of Visual Sound back at that time. They had a lot of dual pedals, including dual chorus and all sorts of stuff like that.
Delays.
Yeah, so they were, I think, in the boutique scene, I think they were early adopters. Homebrew had several, these were probably more like early 2000s, had a lot of dual pedals. This one's called Big D. I don't know if that stands for Dumble or there's some other double entendre.
Oh, Dumble, sorry. I am so immature. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, keep going. Keep going.
So the D could mean many things. I don't know. So this is like another company that was doing stuff. They also had like dual fuzzes. I feel like they had some other dual pedals as well, but I was just thinking about Homebrew. See who else I came up with. Here's another Homebrew. This is the Power Screamer. So this is like a lot of dual tube screamers. Here's another one, the BB Plus. Those are probably like mid 2000s, like 2005 ish. They had the BB Plus, and they also had another one, which was the AC Plus. Let's see if I can find that one. Oh, here's another multi-effects, an Ibanez UE300. Oh, this is more than a dual overdrive. This had, the Lazy J Cruiser. That was another one I had on there as a dual pedal. We talked about the full tone. We talked about the BB. We talked about the two-step.
But we're really talking like 90s. Like gain,
Oh, here's the AC Plus. AC Plus. That was another one that came out in mid 2000s. It was, basically a 2-channel version of the exotic AC preamp or AC. I forget what the second name was, but
RC.
It was either.
There was.
I don't know if it was.
AC.
I know there was BB preamp. Was it AC? AC booster, I think.
AC booster,
which is a bit more gain than the RC, I think.
Yeah, I could never figure out like what the name
really clean
had to do. Was AC was supposed to be more like a Vox thing, and then the BB was more like martially, like a blues breaker. I don't know. I'm sure that somebody has an explanation for this. I never really dove deep into the circuits.
We'll have to do an exotic episode.
Decoding exotic.
Exactly.
But I'm sure that there are some that I am not thinking of in the dual overdrive camp that maybe preceded, let's say, the full tone, full drive, or the visual sound, Jekyll and Hyde. But like I remember at the time, in the 90s, like that Jekyll and Hyde pedal was popular. A lot of people had it. I remember my guitar teacher, I remember, had it. And at the time he was my tone guru, and so when he would show me I remember he had a really cool 50s Strat that was in like what color was it? It's almost like a turquoise. I don't know what color officially that was from Fender, but it was a cool 50s Strat. It was all worn out, and he had really cool gear, like old Tweed Deluxe. It wasn't seafoam. It was more metallic than that.
Okay.
I forget what color they called that, but anyway.
I don't know if you guys had this experience with them, the Jekyll and Hydes. If now that we're on the topic, have you guys ever had to do a setup with those?
Yes.
A customer setup?
I've never put one on a board, I don't think.
Oh man, you are a better man for it, Mason. It is horrible.
It's worse than a fuzz face?
Maybe it's around the same category, but a fuzz face, at least you're just getting the corners, that are a little inefficient. You can fit it into a square hole type thing, but these ones, you got the perfect spot, and then it has that V at the bottom, and that thing just kills any layout that you want to do if you're trying to conserve space.
Here's the one that my guitar teacher had. It was this exact one.
Oh, not the red one.
It's a real early one.
Yeah, it's
so
early.
The visual sound. This one looks way more primitive than the earlier ones. The ultimate, it says Jekyll and Hyde Ultimate Overdrive.
Oh, Ultimate.
So you have drive, tone, and volume for one channel, drive, tone, EQ, volume on another channel, and then you have sharp or blunt on a slider switch.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if anything is in that bottom corner of the V. I mean, why did you do this to us? Why did
I'm sure it was just to stand out. Can you imagine from a merchandising standpoint, like trying to display that upright?
Yeah. That's like JHS doing a video. JHS did a video when I was researching for this episode, and they, how he props it up on the Milkman amp. Usually it's just kind of sitting there. The pedal was just fully sideways, and that's how it was on the video. It's like, it sums up all the issues with this pedal. It's just an awkward
actually,
one.
I did find a picture of the PCB here, so we can take a look. So here's the PCB of a Jekyll and Hyde.
I bet it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so you can see that they just there isn't anything at the bottom part of that V.
Even the battery, the battery's in the middle as well.
The battery's in the middle as well.
There's
so
no excuse.
So for people that are listening, they've basically cut a section into the PCB that's between the 2-foot switches where the battery can kind of fit in sideways, sitting upright.
There's a single layer as well. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Single layer PCB.
This one maybe is a little later. It says copyright 97 to 2004. So presumably this was probably made at least in 2004. I don't know. But I remember seeing these in the 90s.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, now we know there's nothing in that V. Maybe an extra, you could drill a hole in there and just put some picks or something. You got ample space.
Right.
Ample space.
Am I sensing a Goodwood Audio rehousing department anytime?
No. That's another one. I never clicked with the Jekyll and Hyde. I tried.
Yeah.
And I never clicked with the Jekyll and Hyde, although this was a long time ago, so my tastes have probably changed quite a bit. I never clicked with the Full Drive 2. There's a lot of dual overdrives. Yeah, I know, and I should like it. I know that, but and again, my rig has drastically changed since then, but my memories are not necessarily, positive. I would say that for my personal tastes, but everyone else had one and they all loved it, and I just couldn't get into it. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, guys. I feel like I'm just a big downer today, and I'm really trying to just be a positive guy. But yeah, the other thing I think with the dual overdrive conversation in general, it seems like early days it was a lot of an overdrive flavor, let's say a TS9 in a box, plus a boost. That's kind of where we started. And nowadays it's taken a full shift. Obviously those pedals still exist, and there's still people doing a Klon with a boost added in, or a Bluesbreaker with a boost. But today it's a lot of individual circuits. So in your dual overdrive, if I was to look for one, I'm typically looking for what are the two different circuits they have in this pedal, and then what are the, accessory options on top of that. Can I split them in different loops? Can I flip flop? Can I do all that? But it's usually, a TS9 and a Bluesbreaker, or a Klon and an ODR1, or something like that. And so it has definitely shifted quite a bit. I don't know, are you guys using any dual overdrives? And if so, what flavors are you using, or what are you looking for? Where are you guys going to? If someone's in the market listening to this, what do we do? What do we tell them?
I think for me, I get more people asking, and it's interesting, for the drive boost. So the Tim, that's a big one, which I had queued up, which is a fantastic pedal, and they came out with a newer version. So this is the original version. I don't know when it came out, to be honest.
It's 2000. It was probably. I mean, I know. Paul Cochran was doing stuff for a long time, but I think I'm sure I can look this up, but I kind of remember them becoming prominent in the early 2000s.
And that was a big one. The Jekyll and Hyde was. I had a couple of friends who had them. I think for me, because I didn't start really playing until. I'm trying to think of how old I am, till into the 2000s and everything. Some of these pedals, the Full Drive 2 was a big one. But I get more people asking about 2-in-1s when it comes to two overdrives a lot of times, or boosts. There's some of those companies, I think they do the ones where it's a fuzz and an overdrive. I think, I can't remember. I had it once or twice come in.
There are a couple of them. I have some written down. You keep going. I'll look.
Yeah. There's a couple. I mean, and I looked through the website. I actually just had this dual overdrive, which I'll share here, which was new for me actually, because I had never really done them. It was the VSXO, the True Tone. I just had one recently on a setup, and the cool thing about this one is it's one of those that has split sides, so you could do. Like I did, this was one side of the switcher and this was the other, and it was in a PBC, so they could switch between. But the JHS, the double barrel, that was always a really common question. And I remember a lot of people would be like, oh, is this the boost side, or which is the boost side, when it wasn't. It was two overdrive sides, and they give you all the information on it. And the D&M drive, which was a drive boost, which was actually one of the, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first ones that I at least know of where they did the TRS jacks to where you could flip it over, do the dip switch, and one side you could split the sides. And I could be wrong, but that was my introduction into hearing split sides, which that right there opens up the whole game. Because a big thing people got to think about with when they do these pedals the Protein or the D&M, when they have TRS jacks that's doing your send and return, you can't just pull that pedal off and put something that has 4 jacks on the top. Yep. That drastically will change your setup. You have to either know how to solder to switch it out, or have extension cables to plug it in, and then it can get messy. But those are probably the two overdrives are going to stack, or it's going to be a boost and overdrive. That's a big one for me.
It looked like the Tim, I looked it up, was somewhere around 2003 or 2004.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That was one to switch over to being positive. I had the Tim for years, and I really enjoyed it. It's
right here. I was just using it the other day.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Do you guys know what it's based on?
I think he says it's his design. I mean, I'm sure that there's lineage and other stuff. It's kind of it's impossible, but yeah, I mean, I think he's been copied more than his stuff is taking liberties with other previous designs. There's some quite a bit of animus, I think, between him and a few other pedal brands.
I want to try I assume, since they use the same name, that this was a deal they did or agreement, but the MXR mini version of the Timmy. I wanted to try and compare and see how it stacks up to the original, because that could be a great space-saving one for an amazing overdrive. For the MXR. That's like
MXR doing that the King of Tone, whatever they call it. No, it's not
the
Duke of Tone, like that kind of stuff. Like that was a really smart on their end to do that. Another one that just popped up in my mind was the Wampler Paisley.
Mm-hmm.
That's another 2-in-1 that I see that one come through. But I don't. At least the version I had on a board didn't have the split loops. But I think that again is another overdrive boost. Unless I'm wrong.
Wampler, this is something I was going to bring up with you guys and ask you. Obviously, Wampler is prolific as far as releasing pedals, and there's so many different pedals. But as far as dual overdrives, and I don't have them all here, but he's got the Dual Fusion, Gearbox, Paisley, Hot Wired, Pantheon, 30-something, and I'm sure a few more. Like, he has so many dual overdrives, and I was just going to, I guess, inquire as to...
a lot of them are signature pedals, too.
Yeah, like his single pedals versus his dual. Obviously, I don't think he would make that many if his duals weren't selling. But Wampler, in my mind, is quite well respected, and he's doing some really cool stuff. But a big line of dual overdrives, and it was just interesting to see how many he actually had when I started searching.
I actually had one I just found. I'm curious if you guys have had this one. This is a big old one. The Earthquaker devices.
Palisades.
This is a big old unit. It's like the same width of like the Memory Man delay, the
reissue,
the newer version, the reissue, but it's taller. Yeah, but it's a big one, but there's no split loops, so there's no nothing. But there's a lot of those kind of things where it's the dual type of channel. And I said boost overdrive for the Paisley. I meant there were two overdrives, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, and I think a lot of these, like I said before, a lot of these will come down to, like, I tell people, like, you have to plan, like, doing a layout. It's not as easy as just throwing things on a board and just, oh yeah, that will work. Is you have to, like, put some thought process into, hey, if this is a dual overdrive, does it have these things? Can I put them in the switcher? Do I need to put it up front? Do I need to step on it? There's just so many little things, and I think they're great too. For space saving, especially putting two pedals side by side. When you include jacks and everything, it starts to get wider. But yeah, no, the Tim was the big one when I first started in 2007. I started playing, and the Tim and the Full Drive 2. The Full Drive 2 was probably one of my first overdrive boost type pedals. The blue enclosure one. And I know that they've come out with other versions since.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a great time, based on where Brian left us off, for me to get into a short ad break, for me to talk about a couple of sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. The first of which are our friends over at Sweetwater and their program that they have recently launched called the Gear Exchange. Now, the Gear Exchange is designed to compete with things like Reverb and Electronic Bay, aka eBay. And they do a great job and differentiate themselves in one critical way, which is that they allow sellers to take their earnings and place them on a Sweetwater gift card. And in doing so, pay zero, let me repeat that, zero fees in order to keep that money on a gift card. So if you are somebody like me who is routinely buying things from Sweetwater, or Sweetwater is selling something that you are interested in, you can sell your gear, not have to incur that 10 to 12% between listing fees and payment processing fees and all that stuff. You get to keep it all. And I recently had sold off a bunch of pedals, and I took all of my earnings. I actually just bought a custom shop Strat. I'm going to share it here with you so you can see. This is, of course, one of many that they have, but this is the exact model that I got. I got a 61 Strat. It's got some beautiful relicing on it. It's got a nice roasted neck. It's got the tortoise shell pick guard. You know, and I already have, let's see, 1, 2, I have 3 Strats, a Super Strat, but I've always said you can never be too skinny or have too many Strats. I think that's something that my grandmother always told me. So I got another Strat. I love Strats. And this one looks absolutely gorgeous. So I'm really stoked about it. And the cool thing about this whole process is, again, I didn't have to come out of pocket anything. I basically used Sweetwater and the selling of the gear that I had that I wasn't using as sort of a glorified layaway program. The money just kept accruing on the gift card. I kind of, was waiting until I kind of got to that critical amount, then just cashed in the gift card. Didn't have to come out of pocket. I'll do a video on the guitar once it gets here, but it's a pretty cool guitar, 7 pounds, 6 ounces. And I'm going to tell you another thing that I did about this, that I do with guitars just to get a little bit extra lightweight. I know this is an aside. I actually take out all the screws around the pick guard and the back plate, and I weigh each of them individually. And then, I don't use the back plate on any guitar, so that gives you, 6 screws there. So I actually do the specific combination of screws that weigh the least, and sometimes that'll shave off an ounce. Put some different springs on there from our friends at Exotic, their raw vintage. That saves a couple of ounces. So that 7 pound, 6 ounce guitar, once I'm through with it, might be 7 pounds, 2 ounces, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. So interesting thing if you want to get out the digital scale. I use my coffee scale that I use to weigh coffee, which goes really, really, really precisely with grams, so I can get it down to the lowest gram. So anyway, something super pervy that I do, which you might want to replicate. The second sponsor that I want to talk to you about are our good friends over at Neural DSP. And in fact, I'm going to have Neural over to my studio to shoot some videos with us here shortly. So we're going to be creating some content with Neural, showing how to make an old analog guy like me learn some new tricks with some digital gear. And our friends over at Neural are offering our listeners a special discount code where they can get 30% off any of their plugins. And the cool thing about that is that you can take any of the classic amps they have on there, Soldano SLO, Mark II C+, they have a Pliny plugin, Tosin Abasi plugin, Corey Wong plugin, whatever it is, get 30% off. That's 70% away from free. And it's just a matter of time before they update their software where you can take those same amp models and you can actually implant them into your Quad Cortex. So I definitely recommend you check out Neural DSP. Use the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN. Get 30% off over on neuraldsp.com. Back to dual overdrives.
I'm still stuck on if you want to be pervy like me, weigh your screws. And I was like, I guess we got to
So I take them all out of the pick guard. So depending on what era Strat that is, that could be 8, it could be 12. Take them out of the input jack plate or the output jack plate. You take them off of the back plate. Those are all the same size screws. I don't use a back plate, so typically that gives me at least 6 screws. So I have 6 screws that I can remove that are going to give me the lightest weight screws. And then I just it's easier to do this with a new guitar, because they're not relic. This one has some aging to it, so sometimes you have to kind of be willing to compromise some if some of the screws are a little better condition than others, if you want them to kind of look perfectly relic in place. But I think it's a way that you're going to save some weight. You take off the back plate, that takes off a couple of ounces. You get the best set of screws with the needed screws to hold down that pick guard and your jack plate. That can save you 2, sometimes 3 ounces. So
I have a different approach. Sorry, you go, Brian. You go.
Oh, the springs. That was the other thing. The springs, because they load it up usually with all 5 springs. You only really need 2 to 3 springs on a Strat. And the raw vintage ones, I prefer the feel of, and they also are a little lighter than what Fender has.
I gotta ask, can you tell a difference between 2 or 3 ounces? Like when you pick it up?
That's not the point, Brian.
Maybe blind, you could tell a little bit of a difference, but you can't in real time on the guitar. You probably couldn't tell.
Yeah, I was just curious. I do have to side note and say I have yawned a lot this podcast. I am not bored. My kids just started school this week, so we're up super earlier than normal. So if you see me yawning, it's because of lack of sleep. So I had to preference that.
I thought you said
partying.
I thought he said Yanni, the Greek singer from the 90s, and that he was listening to it in the background.
Yanni.
Yanni.
Halloween comes early at the Omilion household.
It does, actually. It does. My family loves Halloween.
This year, Brian is going as Yanni.
I'm going as Snoop Dogg. No. So I just had to preface that, but no, I was curious about that with the way I don't own a Strat, so I didn't know that was a thing to replace the. I don't think
it's a thing. I think that I'm just very perverse in that regard. But maybe this has turned somebody else on to some new technique to make their guitar weigh less.
Probably the same people that put pineapple on their pizza, right? As you've said in the past, fruit on their pizza.
I'm fine with pineapple on the pizza. This is the toothpaste on the pizza, people.
Toothpaste.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I always get flack because I love pineapple on pizza, and apparently that's some sort of deviation.
Yeah. Oh, Hawaiian pizza all day long.
Oh, yeah. The 3 of us. I'm almost forgetting we're still recording a podcast right now. I'm so excited.
And by the way, if Domino's wants to do a sponsorship.
Listen, when we all get together to film a live episode, we're just going to eat pepperoni pineapple pizza and hang out.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
But you were going to say something, Grant.
I got the place already.
Got it.
I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this, and I want you to prove me wrong because I'm trying not to be negative here, but one thing that comes up a lot with dual overdrive pedals, and I want to know if you guys have experienced this, and you can point me in the right direction. Usually with a dual overdrive pedal, it comes with more options. There's more circuits, routing options, flavors, all that. The claim is this dual overdrive, this pedal can do it all. And I have to be honest, as someone that has tried a lot of overdrive pedals and, tried a lot of different gear, that is one of the biggest turnoffs I can have with any pedal, but especially with overdrives, is this one will do it all. As soon as I see that or any variation of that, I basically move on to the next pedal because I don't know if it's a trigger for me or what, but as soon as I see that about a pedal, I just move on to the next one because I can't stand that claim of a pedal. But if it exists, if you guys have come across it, I want to hear more about it and get your thoughts on it.
Do you mean like them claiming that it can do different every type of sound?
All the overdrive that you need, this pedal can do it.
Got it. I don't think I've ever had one. I've definitely seen the ones that claim like it's the clickbait YouTube videos. You'll never need another overdrive after this.
Thank you.
In all big red caps, that kind of stuff. That's obviously clickbait stuff. But when like companies are coming out with it, I think I see more of it coming out from like Chase Bliss. I like Chase Bliss, but like you'll see them do like, man, there's a lot of different options and tones in like on the Brothers. I think it's like a fuzz and an overdrive, and it can do like when they start doing that kind of stuff, it has different types of stuff. But I'm also skeptical with pretty much anyone that ever says this is the last overdrive you're ever going to need, because that's just not true.
Yeah.
I mean, I have said it thousands of times. This is the last time I'm ever going to set up my. I'm not changing my setup after this. 1 week later, my setup's completely changed. It's the same thing. Like I put this debate. It wasn't even a debate. It was a funny Instagram reel about pulling the plastic off of like screens on pedals. It was so stupid. And I had like 60, 70 comments of people arguing about it. And they're like, oh man, a guitarist doesn't keep that pedal long enough to pull the plastic off. And once you pull the plastic off, you're really committed to keeping that pedal. And I think the same thing applies with overdrives, especially because we always are changing stuff out. It's shocking when you get a musician who doesn't change the stuff out. It's because they are happy with their tone. But yeah, it's always a very interesting thing when you see it's like, this is the last overdrive you're ever going to need. I always go, I don't think that's true.
Nothing can do it all, you know.
Nothing. No.
There's always specialties. Like, can you imagine, let's say, somebody is a great pedal builder can't do it all, and I think of the analogy of a great actor. Can you imagine Tom Hanks as the Terminator?
I can.
You're the one.
You just keep running.
The voice of Woody coming after Sarah Connor.
I'll be back.
So there's limitations even among the best of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's a difference between these claims that are being made that one pedal can do a fuzz sound, it can do a tube screamer sound, or a blues breaker, or an ODR1 clone. Just because it can do it doesn't mean that you're going to like it from that one company, or that they do a good job of that sound. And the one that I think has come closest in recent years is probably the Chase Bliss preamp MK2. I avoid saying its full name because I don't know how to say it. Automatone is what I say.
Autotomato.
Autotomatone. From the people that brought you Ibanez. I think that pedal has a whole bunch of different, like they've taken it can do it all to the next level. But even still, I've spent time with that pedal, and by no means is that going to be the only drive I put on my board. It just doesn't do it all as well as other companies do in the different flavors. And so, I had to get that out there because it came up so much looking into all these different dual overdrives of this can do it all, last overdrive you'll ever need, all that type of stuff. And it just drives me crazy when I see that. So thank you guys. Thank you for, going down that rabbit hole with me. What I want to do...
Can I add
Brian,
real quick?
Please.
Just real quick. I just want to add. A lot of times if you are like, oh man, I'll use... I'm not picking on them. They're just a good reference, and I've had this happen before. Chase Bliss Brothers. It's a great pedal. It can do a lot of great stuff. Very compact. Agreed. It can do fuzz. It can do overdrive, and I think it can do boost. I could be wrong. I can't remember. Don't get that pedal thinking, oh my gosh, this one pedal, I'll use an enclosure. This one pedal is going to replace 3 pedals, because it's not, because you can't do fuzz, overdrive, and boost all at the same time off of this one device. You can have a preset that has a fuzz, you can have a preset that has a drive, or you can have a boost. You can't stack them all together. I think that's where some people are like, oh man, I really wanted it. I wanted to stack them all together. Why didn't they do it this way? It's like, well, it's not, that's like a dual engine, like the H90. The H9 is a single engine. The H90 is a dual engine. Quad-Tex, you can do 4 signal chains. So like that kind of stuff, like those types of pedals are not going to be, even the preamp, they're not going to be, I can stack 3 different pedals into this sound. It's these 3 pedals, you can choose one of the 3. I think that sometimes gets really confusing. Some people they throw all their money into this pedal, and then they're like, man, I should have just kept those 3 pedals. Like it's just one of those things. So I had to throw that out there as a thing to think about, does it have a dual feature? Like, that's like the GFI synesthesia is a dual pedal, so you can do 2 types of modulations, like stuff like that. But yeah.
I want to finish up the episode with our top picks. So if you had to get or if you had to have 2 or 3 dual overdrive style pedals on your shelf or on your board, what ones are you picking? Before we get there, I want to throw to our last ad break, and Brian's going to tell us about 2 of our sponsors.
Thank you. Yeah, so we are so grateful for our sponsors. They're all fantastic, and they provide so much for the industry. And this company in particular definitely does a lot. I constantly am seeing them posting different looms that they're doing, or quad racks that they're building, and that is Bestronics. Brad and the crew over there are just absolutely fantastic. They are Chicago based, and they have a beautiful warehouse with all sorts of parts and looms. I just saw them do a loom yesterday for one of my friend's bands, and they're just absolutely stunning, and they just always provide the most amazing equipment and materials. So they have a code, DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off at btpa.com. Go check them out. They sell the DC 2.1 and 2.5 millimeter plugs that we use for wiring setups. They sell cable plugs, square plugs. I think they sell pretty much everything. I mean, anything you can think of, they sell. Except a car. You can't probably buy a car from them. But go check them out. Bestronics, btpa.com, 10% off. And then our final and newest sponsor is Stringjoy. I just put some fresh strings on my Penguin this past week, and they came in a beautiful package from the guys over there. And they are running a code.
A real Penguin?
Yeah, a real
controversial.
One. Really difficult.
We're calling PETA.
He was really difficult. I had to wrangle him, flapping his wings. But they have a discount code for boards. Not flying anywhere, not soaring. BOARDS for 10% off as well. This applies to a single pack or their monthly subscription based. If you're constantly changing out strings, or as Mason calls himself, a string destroyer, and you need more than a couple packs of strings. If you're more than a couple packs a day, string guy, and you need more strings, they would be a great resource, especially maybe you're located somewhere that's far from a local guitar shop. You can just have the strings just show up, and it's the UPS can be your personal roadie for giving you strings. But go check them out, stringjoy.com. Use the code BOARDS for 10% off. Go check them out. I'll throw it back to you, Grant.
Rumor has it Mason was a pack-a-day guy for a while there, and it just was not good for personal relationships, the people around him, all that type of thing. And then Stringjoy, pack a week.
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
I used to say a pack a day keeps the doctor away.
That was a lie, though, wasn't it, Mason?
And now you're a doctor.
No, my grandparents had all sort of weird smoking myths. They were huge smokers. When we'd go to their house and you'd open up like the sliding glass door, it was like an opium den. The smoke would just come billowing out. And my grandmother, when she would get sick, last story, she would always be like, "Oh, I'm going to switch to menthol this week because I'm getting sick."
Oh, no.
And so that was like a wives' tale from
Different
the olden
generation.
days. Yeah, you just switch to menthol when you got sick and make you better.
Oh, my gosh.
Be all better.
Yeah.
My gosh.
So dual overdrives, there's pros, there's cons. We've covered that. Some of the claims, true or false, that some of these companies make. But there are some great ones out there, and there are some that I truly do love. I'll start with my kind of top 3. I had a list, and like looking into this, man, my list is probably about 35 to 40 pedals long of dual overdrives. Some I'd heard of, some I hadn't. But I would say out of the full list, my top 3 favorites in no particular order would be a JHS double barrel, which is a TS9 and a Bluesbreaker type circuit, a Brown Protein, which is an ODR1 and a BB style circuit, and a Nordvang 83, which is a BB and a Klon style circuit. And I'm realizing, like, as I'm looking through all the ones I gravitate towards, all of them have Bluesbreaker circuits in them. And so maybe I'm a TS9 and a Bluesbreaker kind of guy. I have no idea. But those 3 are ones that I have tried and really enjoyed, really connected with. And there's obviously many more. The Duelist is awesome. Gladio's great. There's so many out there. The King of Tone is not on my list, which I brought up before. But what about you guys? What are some of your if you had to put one on your board or buy one tomorrow, what's going to be top of the list for dual overdrives for you guys?
Would you like to go first, Brian? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Two-play.
Well, just looking at what I actually have on my board, I have a King of Tone on my Nashville-inspired pedal board. And then I have a Steel String Supreme Slight Return on one of my bluesy boards. But I would say beyond that, even though I don't own them, I would say Tim absolutely has to be on that list. I think the Jekyll and Hyde, although, maybe it's not fashionable anymore, I think as far as like historically, that's a really important one. And then I think lastly, the Full Tone Full Drive. I think those are still relevant today. I think that was one of the most important boutique pedals of all time.
Yeah.
And I'm down with that. And then another one that I would say is also great, dual pedal but huge, is the Way Huge Camel Toe.
Another good name.
Yeah.
Up there with the Big D.
Yep. And so I would say that one also, especially the original one that was in the mid 90s. That was an important one. Big part of the Mike Campbell sound.
Cool company as well.
That. Yeah.
I really like what they come out with. Yep. Nice. Love it. Oakley's turn.
All right, tell us. Dad put the mute on. I would go to say definitely the Protein. It's one of the ones I own. I'm a big fan of the Duelist as well. The third one is hard for me because I've had a bunch of different. I don't know. I keep pulling the mic up. I don't know why I keep doing that. I've had a lot of different 2-in-1 overdrives. I've had the double barrel a few times. I had the JHS State Line a while back, which is like their Charlie Brown and their Morning Glory in one. So it was a lot higher gain, at least for me.